Today we are going to talk about a tool called the parking lot exercise. This is an exercise that is useful to do kind of introspectively. Maybe, go home one day, maybe it's Friday afternoon, go home, you turn on the TV, lie down on the couch. Let's say there's nothing good on TV that day. So you take out this pad of paper and you decide to do the parking lot exercise. This is how it goes. You write down the names of all the employees that report to you. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to write down the names of all the employees that report directly to you. So let me take a pause here. I'll give you a chance to write on a piece of paper the names of all the employees that directly report to you. Thank you. So you have written down the names of all the employees that report to you. You're lying on the couch and you're imagining this. Imagine that with the wave of a magic wand, you had let go of all your employees, all the employees that report directly to you. You let go of these employees and they are in the parking lot. Imagine that with the wave of the same magic wand, you have recruitment efforts out there with people applying for the same jobs that those employees had. Let's say you had 8 employees that reported to you. So 8 positions open, people all over the place applying for those 8 positions, including the 8 people that are in the parking lot. They apply for those same 8 positions. Now, you're lying on the couch Friday afternoon thinking about this, and you say to yourself, which of these 8 employees would I hire back? And you cross out the names of the people that you will not hire back. Now, so far, this is just a thought experiment. You haven't really done anything. You're lying on the couch Friday afternoon. But here's where it turns into action. Monday morning, you come into work. Let's say Peter was one of those guys whose names you crossed out. Monday morning, you come in, you tap Peter on the shoulder, take Peter into a conference room, possibly into your office, and you tell him, Peter, Friday afternoon, I was home, there was nothing good on TV, so I started doing this parking lot exercise. And I got to tell you, I had to cross your name out. Here are the reasons why I had to cross your name out. These are the things you need to be doing so that next time there is nothing good on TV and I start doing this exercise on my couch, your name is not crossed out. Is this brutal? Is this absolutely brutal? Or is it compassionate? Think about that for a minute. If you're with a group of people, discuss amongst yourself, is this a brutal exercise or is it compassionate? Is that candor of value or is that really misleading? Discuss that, we'll come back. Great. Now, whatever you thought of that exercise, let's be very clear here. By crossing Peter's name off on that pad of paper lying on the couch on Friday afternoon, you pretty much said the following. You said, if I were to reconstitute my team, Peter isn't on it. That's what you said. You said, if I could reconstitute my team, Peter isn't on it. Does Peter know that? Does Peter know that? As in, he says, if my boss were to reconstitute my team, my boss won't hire me. Now, you would think the Peter should know that. You would think in your communications to Peter, maybe in the last performance review, you might have communicated to Peter that communication. You know what? In reality, very few managers communicate that in as clear a fashion. Let me tell you why. Let's just go to a side story here. Let's say you are my boss. Let's say you are my boss and you ask me to do a customer presentation. A very important customer presentation. I agreed. I worked very hard for it. It's the day of the presentation. You happen to be in town. So you're in the room, in the back of the room. I'm doing the presentation. I nailed that presentation. I absolutely nailed that presentation. My presentation is over. The meeting takes a break. We bump into each other in the corridor. Remember, you're my boss. We bump into each other in the corridor. We have some privacy. Now, what would you say to me? You'll probably say something like, Balaji, that was a great job, wonderful job. And I would probably say, thank you, I really worked hard for that. Now, let's change that scenario just a little bit. Let's say you're my boss. You asked me to do a customer presentation. I worked hard. Day of the presentation. You're in the room, in the back of the room. I do the presentation. Let's say I botch it. I totally botch that presentation. I'm done with the presentation, thank goodness. The meeting takes a break. We bump into each other in the corridor. We have some privacy. Now, what would you say to me then? Think about it. It is unlikely that you're going to tell me, Balaji, you botched that presentation. No, you're probably going to say something a little bit softer, a little bit milder. You're going to say something like, now that was a hard presentation, wasn't it? That was a tough audience. Now, what else might we have been able to do there? You are trying to coax me into realizing I blew the darn presentation. You're not going to tell me that. That's exactly what happens in a performance review. I have read literally hundreds and hundreds of performance reviews in my career. Let me tell you how. Remember that Peter? I'm going back to the parking lot exercise now. Remember that Peter you had, your Peter guy whose name you crossed out? That Peter that you said, this is the same Peter that you said, if I were to reconstitute the team, you aren't on it. That Peter I'm talking about. Here's how your performance review to Peter might have gone 3 months ago when you delivered that performance review. You see, 3 months ago, you delivered this performance review to Peter. Now, you had a written review, you had a one-on-one meeting. Now, think about it. How do performance reviews have to start? Typically, on a good, positive note. So, you've been trying to figure out something nice to say about Peter. In fact, you've been trying so hard, you couldn't find anything to say about Peter. So, you've sat up for 2 weeks trying to find something to say about Peter. So, you bring Peter in. You do this performance review. It goes something like, oh, Peter, I really like the way you come into the office, really cheerful, and you say hello to people, and all this fluff stuff that you've got to add so that Peter feels good. Few minutes in, 10, 15 minutes into that meeting, you shift your seat in the chair, and you get to that second paragraph of your performance review. You know the paragraph I'm talking about? The paragraph about all the things that are not going well. And how do you approach that? Here's how you typically approach that. You see, on that one occasion, Peter, you might have possibly considered looking at it slightly differently. On that other occasion, you might have considered alternative ways of looking at that. You go through this roundabout way of saying you blew it on those occasions. And then, how do performance reviews have to end? Remember, performance reviews end on a positive note. So you somehow get a positive note. Peter walks out. What is Peter thinking? Peter's thinking, I got some room for improvement, but I'm doing a pretty good job. That's how performance reviews go. You did not have the courage to say to Peter, if I were to reconstitute this team, you, Peter, are not on it. What the parking lot exercise does is it communicates to that individual that fact in no uncertain terms. There's a reason why we don't communicate that message to Peter as blatantly, by the way. I'm going to leave that for another tool called levels of performance. But right now, what I'm going to tell you is this. Communicating that to Peter in such blunt terms might actually be more compassionate than it be brutal. For after all, isn't Peter entitled to know that? By the way, when we walk around the offices, when you walked around your office, all of us, when we walk around, we have folders in our heads. Folders, manila folders in our heads. These folders have names on them. You got a folder for Peter, and the folder with all sorts of chits in this folder. These chits that say Peter didn't do this right, Peter didn't do that right. You got this folder. You're walking around the office with the folder in your head. And you know what? Your behavior is there with that folder. But he doesn't understand why, because he has never seen the folder. He has never seen the chits of paper in that folder. He doesn't have a clue. Isn't he entitled to an open view of that folder? You only give him that very candid view of that folder. In fact, by the way, if you told Peter that if you were to reconstitute the team, Peter isn't on it, Peter might actually say, you know what, you're a bozo manager. I don't want to work for you. I'm going some other place. I'm going to another manager. That might be better. Are you being compassionate by not telling him? What the parking lot exercise says is that you as a manager have a duty to communicate to your employees that if in fact it is true, if I were to reconstitute the team, you weren't on it. What the parking lot exercise does is it says, you in the privacy of your living room, do this introspective exercise. And when you have that conclusion, make sure you communicate that to your employees. But better yet, you know what? Equally important, communicate to your employees that they are not in the parking lot. That they, in fact, you put them on the parking lot, did this exercise, and you so willingly and with eagerness brought them back into the building. That is a great message. If you give that message often enough, when it is true, on the occasions when you have to tell them you are actually in the parking lot, that message will be taken better. By the way, when you give them that message about you are in the parking lot, you haven't fired them. All you have said is, if I were to reconstitute the team, you weren't on it. It's far better than just walking up one day and saying, I'm sorry, you're gone. At least here, they have a choice of things they can do. Is the parking lot exercise compassionate or brutal? The parking lot exercise. Try it.